We have Sam Bailey today. We're so lucky. He's a great friend and partner in economic development. I'm going to read you his brief bio and then turn it over to him. And he's going to give us a little presentation with some positive news even. Sam Bailey is the Vice President of Economic Development, Metro Denver Economic Development Corporation, a privately funded and government economic development organization serving 9 counties and 70 communities across Colorado's Front Range. Sam will be providing a presentation on the economic impact of COVID-19 to date, as well as updates on the region prospect activity and our national branding efforts. So please welcome Sam Bailey. Everyone's clapping, cheering for you, Sam. I know it. All right, welcome, Sam.
Great. Well, thank you all for having me, and I've now shared my screen, so hopefully you can see it. I'll go through a little bit of who we are and appreciate the kind invitation from our friends in Northwest Douglas County Economic Development, Amy and her team. So again, as Amy mentioned, we're a privately funded and governed economic development group covering the Front Range of Colorado, so some 9 counties and 70 communities, working in partnership with local economic developers like Amy and her team to bring quality job opportunities to Coloradans, both attracting new investments while keeping existing companies happy, healthy, growing. So I'm going to walk through a couple different data points, COVID, the impacts of the COVID on the economy, as well as our prospecting activities and how we try to put some positive messaging into the market moving forward. So the first thing to be really crystal clear, COVID-19 is a health crisis that forced the shutdown of the economy, not the other way around. Unlike 2008, 2009, where we saw the fundamentals of the mortgage industry were broken, causing an economic crisis, this was a health crisis, and public policy from national, state, county, local governments had to force the shutdown of the economy in order to preserve health and safety. So just keep that in mind. These are the numbers in Colorado as of last night, and also be aware that everything we're going to go through, you'll get a copy of that. Amy and her team will send it out along with some videos we'll be providing. But as you can see, we've tested over 200,000 people. We've had about 21,000 positive cases. Certainly looking at hospitalizations, people with COVID, and then those deaths related directly to COVID. The plus 27 FY, that's from yesterday, so that's showing the increase day over day, with impacts in 60 of 64 counties. So this truly has been felt statewide, and we've seen it impact a variety of places throughout the Metro Denver region, certainly. Johns Hopkins University, if you have not seen them, have been doing some stellar work regarding tracking of COVID by county across the United States. I pulled this just last night. This is Douglas County's COVID-19 stats report. And again, this is sourced from Johns Hopkins University. They use American Community Survey data in terms of population and then track through local agencies. Note that some of this information may be delayed, being that Douglas County and Tri-County Health have their own reporting. Some of that might be delayed. But I think, the thing that we're very careful in watching is, one, the healthcare facts. How is this impacting people who don't have employer-sponsored health insurance? Where are they tapping in to cover some of those costs? Certainly tracking population by race, ethnicity, and age. This is going to look different as you go county to county, community to community. But these are important numbers to keep track of. Even if you look at people in poverty, so those are people who live below the poverty line. We need to be vigilant of how this is impacting people across our Metro Denver region. If we look at the S&P 500, we looked at how this is tracking post-SARS, 9/11, MERS, and in the early stages, this most closely resembled the Lehman collapse in 2008. And so you can just see the degree of which you have the move in the first 60 days of trading mirroring the Lehman collapse, which again, that's a pretty substantial economic impact. Certainly unemployment peaking in early March. I think our big focus right now is how we continue to watch those continuing claims, so those people who are continuing to file unemployment versus those who are then finding jobs. But it is, if you look at U.S. first-time unemployment, that peak really happened in March. We're hoping to continue to see that decline. The initial unemployment claims in Colorado also peaked. That was in April. And I think what you noticed here is there's the normal unemployment insurance filings versus gig workers. So we started to see those trickle in as well. And again, our focus is trying to reduce those initial unemployment claims and those continuing unemployment claims. We always like to compare ourselves. That's one of the fun things in economic development. This is a comparison of all U.S. states along with Puerto Rico and Washington, D.C. And this is looking at their labor force and the percentage of labor force that has had to file for unemployment. You can see that Colorado actually is faring quite well. We're 49th of the 52 states and locations identified. But if you look at places like California, like New York, like Georgia, that's a tough position to be in. And so, not to whistle through the graveyard, but in terms of where we are positioned, Colorado has weathered this health crisis and the economic impacts of that health crisis much better than our competing states. Utah is a fierce competitor. We deal with them on a regular basis. They're faring a little bit better than we are. But again, I think what we see is our diversity of workforce, the fact that Colorado had the largest population of work at home employees in the United States. About 8.6% of our workforce already was working at home pre-COVID. We've been able to weather the storm quite well. And again, here's a zoom in of that. So we do feel, this has allowed us to be stronger going through this health crisis.
Hey, Sam, Andrea
yes.
muted me and I couldn't unmute myself, so I put in the chat. Could you explain to the group what a gig worker is, since that's kind of a new term to a lot of people?
Sure. So if you think of the gig economy, so that might be that employee who is not a full-time employee of Google per se, but they may be a contractor where they're providing software development for company A on a project, and then they might, they could be driving for Lyft or Uber. That person who is a contractor in many cases, who's providing a variety of different roles with not one fully dedicated employer. And so I think we see a lot of that, especially in location neutral individuals who may be doing a variety of jobs from their office, their basement, but certainly gig workers, increasingly we've seen more of those in Colorado's economy.
Thank you.
Yeah. The national cost of the response and relief is significant. And mind you, everything that we've spent, almost $2 trillion being put into the economy, we're going to have to pay that back someday. That doesn't go away. And so the Federal Reserve's action, certainly Congress's action, and then administrative actions, this has caused quite a spike in actuality, our debt now exceeds our total GDP of the economy. And so unprecedented investment of the federal government. And I think what we've seen now is you have states and counties identifying their own COVID response funds in the terms of low-cost loans, forgivable loans, grants, and more to help support that economy. So through all that challenge, I do want to walk through, our business hasn't slowed down. We've certainly had some pause on projects, but we remain quite busy. And economic developers work in a very virtual world day in and day out. We're dealing on Zoom calls, video meetings, phone calls with site selection professionals, those consultants hired to represent companies making investments in communities. And so our work, we've just been adaptable and execution oriented, which is how we operate day in and day out, COVID or not. One of the things that we committed to release this year was our industry clusters, and knowing that COVID is going to have some impacts, these will be available online, and we're going to be releasing their full report shortly. We want to make sure that we highlight that this point in our economic cycle where there was a downturn. We want to be able to account for where we were, how COVID's impacted these industries, and where we come out. So that's why we continue the research regardless of the COVID impact. And I think that you'll see, because of our diversified workforce, we've been able to remain quite strong. But certainly there's a lag in federal and even state data where we'll have to continue to monitor what those impacts are. Prospect activity in the Metro Denver EDC remains busy. Now, I will tell you, we have 35 active prospects. About 33%, so about a third of them have pushed pause, meaning the project has not officially been deemed inactive, or they haven't disqualified it entirely, but they are pausing to maintain their employees in their homes and will re-engage. We've been heavily dominated by information technology. Contrary to what many people may believe, we are the suburbs of the coast. The fact that in Metro Denver, you can live urban, suburban, mountain, rural. We are the less dense, highly attractive place. And if I had to be quarantined again, I would want it to be in Metro Denver, not in where my sister lives in Manhattan, or my parents live in Seattle, or other family in Chicago. Those very dense areas. We have the ability to have really unique housing opportunities, whether you want a big piece of land, you want to be in the mountains, or even in a less dense neighborhood in the city, we have that opportunity. Certainly bioscience has been very activated by this. I think we're seeing continued investments. I'll get to a recent win that our region gets to benefit from, but strong wages and certainly capital investment in the pipeline. What are the insights? What are we learning? Again, we are the suburbs of the coast, and that is a good thing. People are looking at the Metro Denver areas that retreat from highly dense enclaves like New York City. Companies are adapting the relocation process, and so are we. So for example, where typically Amy or myself or others would do a site visit with a prospect, tour them through opportunities in Sterling Ranch and other properties, we are taken to the drones, we're taken to the sky. So we are virtualizing that experience, because we can't have 10 company representatives and economic developers on a shuttle going site to site. So we're doing virtual site tours with drones, and I'll show you an example of what we've recently done, and video interviews with industries. So we've adapted that approach. Certainly the conversation urban versus suburban is coming up. If you think about those companies that would traditionally say, I need to be in downtown Denver, now are we thinking, I can't get a couple hundred employees through an elevator bank going up an elevator, that density, not being able to social distance. Google looked at their operations in Mountain View and identified they would have a line of employees nearly 3 miles long, socially distant, and the amount of time it would take to get them in the building and then out would basically keep them up all day. Salesforce did the same thing, that it's just not feasible. By the time they got everyone into the building, they would have to start getting everyone out. So suburban, less dense, low-rise office spaces with greater footprint allow for some of that opportunity. The impacts of oil and gas, which has been driven by both international markets and public policy, is also presenting some unique opportunities. It's challenging because we are losing that office space and those jobs. But tech companies are looking at that, because unlike Slack or Salesforce, which has more dense office space, generally oil and gas offices are a little bit more spread out, more square footage for employees. So there is consideration of utilizing that space. Certainly the soft landings in a co-working space like WeWork are no longer a topic. We aren't seeing that pop up. It is, we'll scale up employees in their homes, and then we'll reevaluate what our office space might be like. I think what's interesting, the chart on your right, you're seeing that's the types of projects we're working on. So from manufacturing, headquarters, office space, more site selectors, those consultants are engaging companies during this crisis on how to look at where they may position their companies. While at other points, companies themselves aren't utilizing those consultants and saying, we need to do our own research as to where we go. So again, that adaptability remains true through our economic development process. I'm going to show you, this is a property north of where you guys are, but on a recent project we did with our partners in Jefferson County. This is an example of some of the drone footage that we shot for an automotive manufacturing opportunity. That's made some news. We were narrowed down from 91 sites nationally to 23, 5 of which being in Metro Denver. But seeing as we couldn't bring the project to the Metro Denver area to have an in-person visit, we want to make sure we could bring it to them. So I'll just play you a quick video here. You might get some breakup here, but I'll just show just a couple seconds of it. And we've had about 5 other sites shot like that, which has, again, given us a nice competitive edge. Certainly something that economic developers deal with all the time. It is not wine and dancing, tax credits, and ribbon cuttings. There's a lot of hard work that goes into this, and we, as much as we play offense, we play defense. So for those of you who may remember, in 2019, AstraZeneca made an announcement that they were downsizing their operations in Colorado and consolidating those to Frederick, Maryland. That impacted over 300 employees in the Boulder County area, so both Longmont and Boulder, and vacated 2 really unique sites in January 2019. this hit hard because we have a depth of talent and a history in the pharmaceutical industry here in the Metro Denver area. So we got to work a cohort of economic developers from the Metro Denver EDC, Boulder Economic Council, the City of Boulder, the Colorado Bioscience Association, the State Office of Economic Development, International Trade, City of Longmont, and others, to figure out how do we keep that talent here and how do we redeploy these facilities to be used for qualified opportunities. So earlier last week, we announced AGC Biologics purchased the former AstraZeneca facility in Boulder, a very, very unique property for pharmaceutical manufacturing. Not many companies can just buy it and do 10 improvement. There are pieces of equipment that are cemented into the ground 3 stories tall. So this is a highly specialized facility, but this is going to bring 280 new jobs, average wages of $96,000. So just about breaking even with job opportunities to what we lost from AstraZeneca. These are kind of the hallmark projects of good community building, filling the gap when an employer departs. But we toured 6 domestic and foreign companies through the site in that about 1-year timeline, including a company from Japan who flew in 50 engineers to scour the site to evaluate the equipment. And in pharmaceutical, that equipment, that certification for that equipment can expire quite quickly. So getting this property put back into motion was really important. So this was a great win that we had recently. And we're happy to be working with the company AGC Biologics and their investment here. So what's keeping us up at night? Certainly the Colorado General Assembly. Fast, friendly, and free was their tagline coming into a unique session post-COVID. It's certainly been fast, not sure it's been friendly, and certainly not free. I think what we are seeing is a combination of major changes in tax policy that will be difficult for small businesses to navigate, some additional loans being created through the Climate Act that we have concerns about how a company might want to take advantage of those in an ever-changing tax environment. Certainly the global pandemic of COVID is still alive and it's still real. Certainly the unfortunate events regarding George Floyd, police brutality that we've seen, that's certainly impacted our community. You've seen the protests in Denver and elsewhere throughout the community. So there's a lot of uncertainty, and certainly I think a lot of fatigue from both COVID and also these recent events. We have some significant public policy challenges, especially at the local level, we need to address. Continuing unemployment claims, some decline, but more. We need to see more. And you know, these are a little bit dated numbers, but you know, 323,000 jobs lost. We're seeing more being reported following that lag, but our unemployment rate's 11.3%. And mind you, we were at about 2.7, 2.8 coming into COVID-19. So again, the fundamentals weren't broken with Colorado. We certainly have a lot of improvements to make, but I think we are positioned much better than a lot of other states to recover. Why we might sleep a little bit? So we already live the nation employees working from home. Now that's not to say that every employee has the opportunity to work from home. Work from home is a luxury, it is a privilege, it is not available to every industry. Frontline workers don't get to work from home, certainly, so that's also been tough. Not every employer is set up. Our diversity of industries has helped keep us stable. The fact that we're not reliant on just tourism. If we were just a tourism-oriented economy, we would be doing much worse. Our diversity of industries, and we've actually seen companies hiring. Just down south in the Douglas-Arapahoe County area, companies like Fidelity are on a hiring blitz. Comcast. We see that many companies are actually looking at this as an opportunity to scale, and they've adapted their hiring practices so they can work remotely. Our workforce is both welcoming and adaptable. So the Metro Denver EDC will be releasing some research here in the next few weeks, but we actually surveyed during pre-COVID about 2,000 Metro Denver residents to understand why they like working and living in Metro Denver. And with about 80% significance, our responses, they identified Colorado as a very welcoming place. And it's interesting, only about 42% of us are native. I'm a recovering Chicagoan, please don't hold against me. But we have people who've moved here either for a job, quality of life, education, family, whatever it might be. And that's data we're gonna start putting out to the market so people can see that we are truly a welcoming community. 2 campaigns, which I'm going to go through. We launched Remote and Resilient and Working to Keep Us Working. We had an investor of ours, Excel Energy. One of their line technicians got heckled by someone in a neighborhood saying, you shouldn't be out here, we're supposed to be social distancing. And it really prompted a question of, You know, we couldn't do this from home without electricity or telecommunications. That there are people, whether they be in a grocery store or emergency services or utilities, who are working to keep us all working in this new framework. So using those campaigns targeted markets nationally, as well as to targeted companies that we believe would be quality employers in the Metro Denver region. So we launched a couple of those initiatives. First one being Working to Keep Us Working, highlighting just all those companies that have had to really be dynamic. So our construction industries who are on the forefront of making sure that we have quality institutions, hospitals and more that are doing that building from. People are still buying homes, so people like land title. So we've had to keep this momentum going, but it puts positive message into the community of those that have not been able to work from home, have not been able to, hide in their office or their basement, but have had to be on the front lines. Even for many of us going to the grocery store, those people have not had a break. In fact, they're even busier handling all the demand. Our doctors, our firefighters, these people don't get a day off. And then highlighting those that are even employing or hiring new employees during this time. And again, there are just many examples of the ways people are working to keep us working in Metro Denver. And we've had to lightly do this, knowing that there have been obviously significant real impacts, but that positive messaging, I think we all need to see that our neighbors are at work. We are trying hard to make our community a safe place to be, and that people can still have a quality job opportunity. And those impacts in one industry, we also want to highlight there are others who want to hire you. Even if you don't have the skill set, they want to train you and hire you because they ran into this health crisis with 2.8% unemployment. Let's figure out ways to get those people back to work, even if that requires an industry change.
Thanks for showing First Bank there. We have a couple of First Bankers on the call here.
We're big fans of First Bank. They're a trustee of our organization. And I think certainly, to have a hometown bank that has led connecting employers of all sizes to the federal loans, navigating, what's the right thing for your company to pursue, even if it's not a federal loan, but existing product. The amount of calls I'm sure all of us have gotten from a company saying, I need help, I got to apply for that program. And to actually say, well, before you do that, let's look at your existing financial position, what other resources you can take advantage of. Because again, there's not a ton of free money out there. Many of these are still loans. They have obviously fine print that if you are not savvy, that makes it hard to navigate and understand what your liability will be. So I think our financial services community has been extremely important in helping businesses navigate the onslaught of federal, state, local programs that are being made available. And then you can see here, we've had some national recognition. Certainly AGC Biologics got us a lot of news. The Wall Street Journal covered us in terms of, we were booming before coronavirus and how we're bouncing back. That's great coverage. And then Forbes ranked us among the top 10 cities best positioned to recover from coronavirus. And that's comforting to hear that, again, we're getting that traction as we're a good place to be for a lot of reasons. Now, granted, we still have our challenges. We're still navigating a legislature that is seeing, roughly a $4 billion shortfall. And we don't have the ability to raise taxes with Tabor, nor is now a good time as businesses are just starting to even try and come back. The last is remote resilient. So I think what we've highlighted is if you look at all of our industries, people working from home, from rocket scientists to my wife works with the U.S. Army out of Fort Carson, how we've been able to keep kind of our culture, our engaging spirit alive. And so one of the videos we'll send out is a remote resilient video. We're about to release kind of the second version of that will be deployed to national markets about, again, why Metro Denver and why Colorado is a place where you can be remote and resilient, and how our workforce has really weathered that storm. We've done a couple things from the video. We actually created a staff-driven playlist on Spotify, which has been downloaded a bunch of times. On Pinterest, you can actually find us. Why are economic developers on Pinterest? I don't know. But actually, best recipes for quarantine with different quarantine tag names. So trying to, again, put positivity into the market because it's tense. People have been stuck at home. They've lost their jobs. They've been impacted directly or indirectly by COVID. We need to keep some positivity, some shining light that we all are aspiring and pointing to. I think that allows us to collaborate, convene, and work together. Why we do this is because we want people to learn more about us. And we had a perception challenge coming in. We were dope smokers who want to go snowboarding on a Friday. People think that. outside the market. In fact, when we recruited Slack to Metro Denver, their CFO asked me in the San Francisco office, now do all of our employees have to have a four-wheel drive vehicle to get around the Denver area? And that's still real today. That was just over a year ago. So we constantly have to work to change these messages, even during a health crisis. And you can see for the minimum investment we've made, for example, on Twitter, about $550, total impressions over 200,000. Our profile has been visited with 138% growth. The impressions that we're making are substantial. Same thing with LinkedIn, same thing with Facebook. In Facebook, our total reach was up 35,000% in the past 30 days. So we are pushing on all these channels with modest investments to really, get some recognition that Metro Denver is a great place for companies, whether it be COVID or not. So that's a brief overview of kind of where we are. It's one organization with big impact, and we rely on our economic development partners, both from federal, state, county, local organizations that we work in collaboration with, and our investors who really tell us, where they want to see the movement go forward. So I want to leave obviously some time for questions, and I might do the stop share on the screen so we can see everybody's beautiful faces, and happy to answer anything. And again, you'll get these slides in a PDF form sent to you from Amy and her team. I'll also include links to the videos and some of the content on our website should you want to research that for yourselves.
Great, thank you, Sam. Andrea, can you unmute everybody, or should we have them ask questions in chat?
They should be set to unmute themselves now.
Okay, you can unmute yourself and ask a question. Feel free. Someone's got to be first. I have a quick question for you, Sam. This might be more for your marketing person, but do you have any data that people spend more time on social media during the pandemic so that those impressions go up?
That's a great question. I don't have a good answer for that.
Okay.
I would like to think, at least on LinkedIn, Facebook, we're getting some more traction, and that's fine. I think our audience primarily sits on LinkedIn.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's where Facebook going up 35,000, that's great. There are not many people who stay up late at night Facebooking economic development groups. On LinkedIn, however, that's where our customers, our decision makers, our clients, our influencers really sit, because that's kind of the business ecosystem. So I think I'm much more concerned about seeing an uptick on LinkedIn. Twitter, I think obviously the political landscape, both federal and local, Twitter is really being focused on different areas. So we're trying to stay focused on LinkedIn for the time being.
Great, thank you.
I have a question for you, Sam. We've been getting at the Chamber and EDC, obviously a lot of emails with the legislative session back in and a slew of bills in the last few days. What are your biggest concerns right now?
All of them. So I think, the budget shortfall is going to impact, schools really hard. And mind you, the state doesn't really have a lot of discretionary cash just sitting around. So, the cuts are going to be significant. We're not paying our para payment this year, which is about $200 million. That's just on the interest. And we're basically paying the most expensive loan ever at over 7.25%, when we should be paying that and going elsewhere for that financing. We're paying the most expensive loan ever by not making that payment. The discussion, and this just came out last night, being led by Speaker Becker, Casey Becker, the overhaul of tax policy, we have some significant concerns about. And primarily that's going to hit small business more than anything. And at the same time, the Climber Act, which is a $250 million loan program the state plans to put out, $100,000 loans, about 4% interest. You're putting out a major loan package, which is debt and liability, alongside major changes to to tax policy, which we believe also has some Tabor implications that we're legally reviewing right now. If I'm a small business owner and I've already gone through hell in a handbasket through this process of COVID, I'm going to be less likely to go out and say I need a $100,000 loan at 4%. And what's my tax policy then going to look like? There's just so much uncertainty. And this is where people like First Bank sitting down and saying, how do I reduce my risk yet have access to capital? And they may say that's the right or the wrong program to pursue. So I think that creates so much uncertainty. Not every business has a government affairs person, a tax department who can say, you know, what's the best case scenario. So that uncertainty, I think, is really challenging. And anything that moves Colorado to where we are different from the 49 other states in terms of tax policy, it's a, you know, a unique factor of Colorado that we don't want to have happen. We don't want to say all 49 states do this way and then we make it really confusing here. Welcome to Colorado. That just doesn't work. So that's challenging. And then the legislature committed to be fast, friendly, and free. They're fast, it's not friendly, and it certainly isn't free. We will be paying for this. And I'm certainly concerned about the budget shortfall this year. Next year is going to be even more interesting. So I think we see those challenges, and the uncertainty as to how we're going to navigate them. It's still TBD. Our public affairs team is aggressive right now, tracking legislation, providing feedback. They were up till about 10 o'clock last night, testifying on bills and providing feedback. So it's a lot of TBD right now, but I think the biggest concern is if you're a small business owner, your tax policy is about to change. There's about to be a bunch of loans put in the market. How do those things work, and what's going to be the business confidence?
Thank you.
Sam, I have a question for you. When you talk about hell in a handbag basket, I think the conversation that's coming up where next fall, we look like we will still be homeschooling at least part of the time students and still trying to work. How does that affect the employers in the Denver market?
That's a great question. I have an 8-month-old who is luckily napping right now. But if you hear a screaming child, that's mine. It's challenging. My wife works for the military. I work full time. We have a kid at home. I think what's been nice is a lot of employers have understood a certain level of patience in this realm. You know, this summer is going to be tough. A lot of day camps are not opening up. You have daycare centers which have had to lay off employees because they can't be reopened. I think it's going to cause a pretty big shift. And then you look at the funding impacts of K through 12 in the state. Now you're removing resources from an constrained school. So the question is, even if the school's open, are they ready? Do they have the capacity to take on kids going back? I think, you know, looking at accommodations that are being made by employers to address daycare, and I think, you know, legislature should do a better job of taking a look at that because you've had people impacted. You have had obviously a disruption in productivity, but it's not just happening here in Colorado, it's happening nationally. And I think we've had some reopenings, but even in places like Georgia, you have some concerns of spikes. So, you know, it's something we continue to watch. This is not an area of expertise, but I think certainly for us, my son Ament has been on a couple economic development prospect calls, which means if we lose the deal, I can blame him too. But I think, you know, the big concern we have is it's health and safety. Are we sending kids back to an environment where they'll be able to learn? They will be able to benefit from their education. But if you think about, you know, my kid's 8 months old, so he's mobile and crawling, but a 6th grader being spread out 6 feet from their classmates, not being able to engage, do partner projects. I mean, learning is going to be disrupted, unfortunately. I'm sorry, I don't have a better answer on that, but it's, even as a parent, it's challenging now. Thank you, Krista. And I see we have a question in the chat from Aaron Jones. Northwest Douglas County EDC is working to tell a bigger story about our area in an effort to continue to attract business to our region from local market. From your perspective, Sam, what are some of the benefits our part of town has to offer that perhaps other areas don't? What potential opportunities do you have now to capitalize on? So certainly, I think if you are in the dense enclaves of San Francisco or of New York, and you look at communities like Sterling Ranch, You have large square footage. You have access to trails. You have parks. It is a beautiful scenery. If I was cooped up in a New York studio, relocating there would be like a breath of fresh air, because you have space to both recreate, you have great places to live, the investments that have been made in broadband and that connectivity with smart city technology, great place to work. I mean, you have a lot to offer because of the livability. And Douglas County, not a bad place to work out of from home, because you still have access to trails, to recreation opportunities, diverse housing opportunities. So that's certainly attractive. Now, on the commercial opportunities, the question becomes, I don't think a lot of people are going to be excited to get on mass transit. And, Douglas County, there's mass transit along, I-25, the spine of kind of our region, some bus, but the question on mass transit, is that really a big consideration? Because companies that are heavy mass transit, they're going to look in, downtown Denver or along the outer line areas that have a dedicated light rail stop. Not having a dedicated light rail stop in a community like Sterling Ranch, for example, you can create less dense opportunities for commercial developments, because again, I don't think people are going to be jumping to get on mass transit considering COVID, transferability of the virus, and more. And so that does put suburban markets, I think, in a stronger position to say, instead of having hundreds of people convene to go up a elevator bank, you can have great livability of your employees to work from home and create a lighter suburban office footprint for in-person meetings that you need to have. So it might be that, there's a 3-story building where it's larger floor plate, greater square footage that's for socially distanced meetings. It's set up with audio visual. So I think suburban markets will have some creativity here because of that low density. And I don't think transit will be as big as a barrier for those communities, because people are less inclined to get on mass transit these days.
To follow up on that, Sam, our family lives in Sterling Ranch, and we did a interview with Siemens the other day on what it's like to have 2 working parents and 2 kids doing school at home. And part of it was the outdoor trails along with working at home. So you can go out and do your dog walks or go over to a food truck, plus have 4 people on the internet all the time working. So it'll be interesting to see how they promote that kind of activity.
I'm a big fan of the walking conference call. My team knows it because I can hear a little bit of wind, but I only commit to 3 Zoom calls a day. Beyond that, I'll do a phone call, but it's challenging because it is not, the visual in-person connection. The other thing, if you think about it, your eyes generally will focus or kind of look at something where there's it's blurry or it's not clear and try and clarify it. That's just our kind of autocorrect eyes. When you have a bunch of people on a Zoom call, you're constantly looking at, that person's clear, that person's not. From your mental health, not looking at a blurry screen all day is certainly, it's good to take a break.
Zoom fatigue.
Exactly.
Any other questions? It's an awkward silence before the end of a Zoom call for final questions. I think Randy has one.
Thanks, Amy. I do. Hi, Sam. How are you doing?
Good. Nice to see you, Randy.
Good to see you. Have we started looking at what Metro Denver is going to start looking like when we come back, as we start to see more and more companies saying, my employees are going to now work at home? And instead of having them all in a building, it's going to create a lot of dark space. That may be an opportunity, of course, but it also may be a real issue for how we operate in the future.
Yeah, I've had calls with JLL, CBRE on kind of what their perspective is in the downtown market. And you have companies that are kind of, I think, reevaluating their leases. I think we're looking at lease expirations, the renewal. Is it going to be big floor plate, dense space, or will be much smaller? We're working with Live Sotheby's certainly on some of our relocation work, because the as you mentioned, the at-home office or the at-home virtual gym is now a prized feature on many of home listings. So, In the commercial real estate market, I think downtown is obviously the biggest risk. One, the oil and gas square footage that flooded the market was so much the downsizing. I think where JLL, CBRE, Newmark, Cushman, all those firms are going to be concerned is what's the lease renewal look like? Is it going to be a much smaller, different kind of experience in space? Certainly if you're in commercial or tenant improvement furniture, the square footage per employee will probably look different. You may have some hoteling that's less dense with social distancing and kind of cleanliness requirements. So I think, that's a big concern. JLL and CBRE are heavily tracking what renewals will look like and kind of where their clients are and getting back in, because that's going to be some indicator of that comfort level. I think so on the residential real estate side, that's another kind of cue up towards larger square footage homes. For example, I live in way too small of a house for a global pandemic, is what my wife and I agreed upon, especially with an 8-month-old kid that loves to tell us how loud his voice is. So I think we will see a shift from, reducing liability, because next to labor, your real estate costs can be substantial in your leases. We'll probably see that shrink a bit. Certainly there'll be a priority on housing opportunities. And again, if you're an employee, I can buy a big home across the Metro Denver region and work remotely for a New York company because they don't even have an office anymore. They're all working remotely. Why not do it here? And I think that's where we're trying to leverage that, some of our messaging. But I think, the office space it's a big question mark. I think about Charles Schwab over in Lone Tree. They have 4,600 people that converge on that campus every day. And that's a heavily regulated through FINRA organization. So places like Fidelity and Schwab have had to request regulatory changes because now people are providing financial advice and investment activity from their home, which is reminiscent of challenges that we had in 2008, 2009 of people doing stock trades and bankrupting companies from their lake home. So I think there's a lot of dynamics here, but I do think we'll see some substantial changes, especially from those more virtual companies like tech and financial services in downtown. I do think it gives way for the residential market to look a little different, because I think post-COVID, people are going to be like, I want square footage, I want a backyard. They're going to have that desire for more livability in their workability.
Thanks, Sam.
Thank you. Good to see you, Randy.
Good to see you.
Yeah.
Any other questions for Sam? No? Well, Sam, we certainly appreciate your time today, and we look forward to working with you on the recovery as always. And I'm sure that we'll get this presentation out to everyone, and we may get another follow-up question. But everyone, thanks for being here, and good luck with all the rest of your Zoom calls today. We hope to see you in person soon.
Thank you guys for being great partners, and thanks to Northwest Douglas County Economic Development. And you'll be getting all of the slides and links here shortly.
Great. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Have a great day.